Well, hello again. Um, this is the second time we met, and I've gotten a few emails about textbooks. And according to the bookstore, we were using something written by Bill Edwards, which we're not using. I told them to correct that. I told the department that I was using the Columbus State University COMM 1110 Public Speaking Custom Edition, uh, second edition book. They said, okay, great. Well, they emailed me today and told me that the second edition is no longer in print and we're using the third edition now. They apologized for not catching it sooner. And it's like, well, okay. So what am I supposed to do? Because I don't have a third edition yet. Well, supposedly, chapter 1 hasn't changed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a lecture video on chapter 1. According to the syllabus, we're supposed to do chapter 1 and 2 this week. We will not be doing chapter 2 this week, just chapter 1. So, off to the races, as they say. Chapter 1 and the required textbook. Now, if you don't know, didn't get all that name down for the textbook, it's in the syllabus. So feel free to look it up in the syllabus, okay? Now, the question is, what is communication? It's something that actually has been studied for over 2,000 years. It is probably, at least in my opinion, it is the oldest subject that we study. Some people might say science is, some people might say that math is, but I honestly believe we were studying communication or how to communicate before we had any idea what science was or math was or anything else. It's been studied by the Greeks, the Romans, the Egyptians, the Chinese, about everybody has studied it. And it's something that we have to deal with. Now, technology has changed communication. It's changed it immensely. From the telegraph to the telephone to the radio to two-way communications to now to digital cell phones and all this other good stuff. We have ways that we could communicate across time zones around the world that we never had considered before. And many people nowadays take it for granted. You know, it's like, well, we've always had cell phones. No, we haven't always had cell phones. And I honestly believe that in some ways technology has changed communication for the better. But on the other hand, I think it's also changed it for the worst in some aspects, especially interpersonal communication. And we're all guilty of it. I had dinner the other night with one of my children and her spouse, and after dinner, the four of us sat around the table, each with a phone in our hands, in another world. We could have been talking to one another, but we were reading Facebook and LinkedIn and Snapchat and all those other things that seem to interfere with how people communicate. Is face-to-face communication dying? And in some aspects, I feel that it is. In some aspects, I feel that we've become too dependent on the technology. Online dating, social networking, friends. How many friends do you have? Not friends online, but how many real friends do you have? I think it'd be better, more appropriate if they listed them as acquaintances instead of friends. But they call them friends. And I can remember when Facebook was just academics, and then they opened it up to everybody. And a friend of mine, his 8-year-old granddaughter wanted to friend me on Facebook, and it's like, no, I don't need to be friends with an 8-year-old little girl to begin with. There's things I talk about that is far beyond her realm, shall we say. And then some of my nephews in Illinois became friends with me, and they automatically sent a friend request to all my friends because it was like a game to see who could have the most friends. Well, on Facebook, which is archaic to many of you, I have about 590 friends, and I know every one of them. On the other hand, on LinkedIn, it's more of a social business networking thing, and I've got a couple of thousand friends on there, and I don't know how many followers I have on either one because I never pay attention to it. But you know, friends is defined differently now than it was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever. Multitasking. A lot of people multitask nowadays. Well, the problem with multitasking is you cannot do many things as well as you could do one thing at a time. A lot of people, I can multitask. Yeah, you can multitask, but it distracts you from something. When texting first started, my son was driving. The next thing you know, he's driving with his knee and texting somebody on the phone. And I looked over and said, "What the heck are you doing?" Actually, I said something else, but this is a class, so I'll keep it like that. And I'm texting someone, so, no, pay attention to driving, There's some things you shouldn't multitask with, and driving is one of them. Digital natives. Most of you are digital natives. That means that you grew up around technology, and it's second nature to you in many aspects. I have a 4-year-old granddaughter that gets the phone and goes to YouTube and do all the other things that, does a lot of stuff on the phone I don't know how to do because I don't use it for all that stuff. Digital immigrants is what I am. It's something that I had to learn as I got older. I tell this to many of my classes that I got one of the first 16 email addresses in the European theater when I was in the Army. And, a lot of people are like, well, everybody gave me an email? No, back then everybody didn't have one. It was, what job you had and all this other stuff. And it wasn't for socializing. It was strictly for business. I mentioned that to a class one time in class, and they walked out of class, and my daughter happened to be a student at CSU at the time, and one of the girls in my class knew my daughter, and she walked up to her and says, "Your dad's really old." Yeah, I am. I'm old. I'm 60 now. But I am a digital immigrant. Uh, Technology is permeated into everything. You can tell your faucet through Google Talks or Alexa or whatever, to give you 4.5 ounces of cold water and da 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 da. My garage door opener is tied into the web, so if I'm gone, I can see if somebody's opened my garage. You can dim your lights and change the color in your lights in your house. You can use it to pick TV shows. It's permeated into everything, and it's going to continue. The problem with so many avenues of information is that a lot of people get into certain silos. They go on the web and they find things that they agree with. And those are the things that they read all the time. I personally watch Fox and CNN. I look on, I have both conservative and liberal feeds that I follow because I want to know what both sides are saying. But I have some cousins that are extremely conservative, and anything but Fox is blasphemy. And nowadays, because Fox doesn't support Trump, that's even become questionable. They have all these other weird little places that they go for information. And if you only get told the things that you agree with, you can't broaden your mind. So we need to worry and watch about silos of information. Now, more communication has some benefits as well. benefits are associated with health literacy and well-being. The more that you can find out about diabetes and overweight and exercise and different drugs, the better you can be as a person, the better patient that you can be when you go see your doctor, because you can ask intelligent questions and be well read on the different things you're talking about. Uh, the communication, digital communication, fulfills a need uh, to satisfy identity. You know, when you create your profile on there, you're creating an identity you want other people to buy into. And hopefully, you're being honest about it. There's a lot of people that aren't. But it creates and it helps to create your identity. It is one of the most asked for skills by employers. Look at any job announcement, and they say they want you to have good communication skills. Influence social and personal relationships. Communication is what we use when we see somebody we want to get to know better. We use communication to promote that relationship. We use communication if we have a social agenda that we want to support. For me, it's advocate for people with disabilities. And I use my communication skills to influence the social relationships that I have and the personal relationships to help get support and things that I care about. Critical thinking. I want you to be a critical thinker. That's what I want you to get out of this class more than anything else. Be able to think about stuff that you're hearing and you're reading and be able to analyze it and see if it's factual, if it's fantasy, if it's if there's a kernel of truth to it, if it's biased. I want you to be critical when you think about stuff. Building a community. You can't build a community without communication. It's something that we have to connect with one another. It's something we have to make the community better. It drives social change. We are starting to see more and more social change for minorities. Are we at a point where everything's good? No, we're not. Are we where we were in the 1950s? No, we're not. We're moving forward. But the only way we can move forward is through communication. The only way we can make things better is to communicate what the situation is and how we can make it better. One of the driving forces that helped the racial inequality fireball that was in the 60s and 50s was that the northern states where they said, well, it can't be that bad, showed video of police sicking dogs on people of color. And people learned that, hey, it is that bad. Is it fixed? No, it's not. Is it getting better? Yeah, it is. Do we got a lot of work to do? Yes, we do. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that through communicating. We're going to change society through communication. Now, communication is dynamic. It doesn't just have a beginning and an end. It's ongoing all the time. Well, some people would argue that if we've never met, the first time we meet is when communication begins. Okay, fine. But I want to say before we meet, the communication has started. Because when you see me walking with my cane, you are already getting information about me and my identity. And you're adding up stuff before we've said one word to one another. So there is some starting point, but on the other hand, it's ongoing. When I speak and I say something and you listen and you're decoding and you're watching me and you're nodding and you're understanding and you're thinking about something else, it's a dynamic process. It's not, just me speak, you speak, me speak, you speak. It's a process. It's collaborative. We can't communicate by ourselves. We have to have somebody to communicate with. Communication involves messages. Messages of how you doing, hope you're well, lovely weather, all kinds of stuff. But there is a message involved. The question is the person we're trying to communicate with getting the message we're sending? It's creative. It's not something that somebody else wrote and you read. You have to put it together and figure out how you're going to say it. And what you want to say, you create a different way to say it for different people. If you want to borrow $20 from your friend, you could say a bunch of stuff. If you want to borrow $20 from your mom and dad, you're going to say something different. So it's creative. It's participatory. We have to participate in it. It's nothing that you can do without participation. Interpersonal communication. That's communication between two people. Now it's a lot more depth than that. But there's a whole course on interpersonal communication. But basically, it's communication between two people. Public communication is more like this. I'm talking to a group of people. Mass communication, integrated media, is newspapers, news, radio. They're talking to thousands of people. There are different metaphors for communication. One of them is transmission, source, and sender. It's like I was saying a while ago, it's interactive, it's dynamics going on. It's not, originally they were thinking communication is I speak, you listen. But as you're listening, I'm getting feedback from you if we're in person. And so I speak, you listen, I get feedback, I change how I'm talking. I know you understand it. I go to something else. I reinforce it. It's not just source sending it out. It's an interaction, and you have to encode and decode and encode. I say something, you have to translate it to understand it, what you're talking about, and encode it and decode it. It's a transaction. Information we're both communicators in a relationship. I'm not just, it's not just me doing the communicating. Like I said earlier, you're giving me feedback. In class, at about 45 minutes into class, I get feedback all the time. I start hearing keys rattle. Students are putting their books up and getting the keys out because they're getting ready to go. And it's their subtle way of telling me, shut up, we got to go. So, it's that back and forth that we have. It's a social construction of reality. And I think about that. Communication socially constructs the reality that we live. In your dining room table at home. You call it a table. Why? Because your mom and dad called it a table. Well, if you were raised in Germany, it would be a tisch, not a table. So using communication, we socially construct the reality that we live by. I mean, and language is a good example of that. It's called this because of the language that you use. You have constructed that reality. It's not the same everywhere. It's culturally dependent. Communication competence. You have to be a competent communicator to excel in the world. You have to not only be competent at getting information out, you have to be competent at taking it in. And you have to be understanding when you're talking to different people. You know, I had a friend that was from Colombia, and she said, "Well, I hate giving presentations because sometimes I slip into Spanglish. You know, Spanish and English combined." And I said, "Yeah, but look at it this way: at least you can do it in two languages. I have trouble doing it in one." So I've heard a lot of people talk about people with their accents. Okay, they got an accent, so what? You know, having communication competence and cultural competence makes means that you realize that they're a little different, but I can still understand them, and it doesn't take away from their intelligence or their intellect because they speak, you know, something different. I think about it this way: if you're giving a presentation, you will probably know, I don't know, 10 or 15 synonyms for anything you want to talk about. Somebody that's giving a presentation in English, which isn't their first language, doesn't have that repertoire of all the adjectives that they could use or synonyms that they could use to describe something. So a lot of times they seem like they're stuck because they're trying to think of that one word that they know instead of being able to switch to 15 different ones that they know from their native language. Communication ethics. With power comes responsibility, said Voltaire. If you are in a position of power, you have to be ethical and you have to use ethical communication. You know, some people would argue, no, you don't, but, you know, I'm saying that you do, in my opinion. You need to be an ethical speaker. Uh, Connecting and engaging. We want to connect and engage with other people. Ernest Hemingway wrote a book, No Man is an Island. Actually, the book is For Whom the Bell Tolls. The Bell Tolls for Thee, for No Man is an Island. And he took that from somebody else, I can't remember who. But the point is, when we became a person, we need other people. And this pandemic we have going on right now, I was listening to the news earlier, and the suicide rates are incredible, especially for young people that aren't in school because pandemic has them at home. And they're lost without their companions, and they don't know what to do. So we need that interaction. We communicate to meet people. We communicate to build bridges. We don't want to be alone. I mean, alone is fine at times. There's times I want alone time. But there's other times where I want to share. I don't want to be alone. Everyday life, everyday aspects in life require communication. From going to the store, buying a pizza, ordering something over the phone, ordering over the internet, uh, giving directions, getting directions. Everyday aspects of life require communication. So, folks, that is chapter one. I hope it's helpful. I will post my speaker's notes on Cougar View. Please get the third edition of the Columbus Communication COMM 1110 public speaking book. I will get mine as soon as I can, and we'll figure out what we have to do after that. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Only thing you have to do this week is watch the video, read the notes, and post something in the discussion. Have a good day.